Hey everyone, my name is Ojus. Yes, I'm that Ojus, the famous comedian, I'm in all the movies, and I'm the ruggedly handsome guy that's dating all the famous supermodels. I'm just kidding. But, I wasn't always this famous, I wasn't always this rich, as you know today. It took a lot to get me where I am. I'm going to tell you a little story here. I think it started about 8 years ago when I was just starting out as a comedian. I was doing pretty well in my circles, but I was getting tired of doing the same act over and over. I was trying to transition into acting, and, I feared Hollywood would cast me as the funny friend. I knew I had so much more to offer, and so I created this new crazy act called Justin, who was a foul-mouthed, sex-craved playboy alpha male who talks about all his sexual conquests and all the funny things that happens to him when he's with girls. I was pretty confident that this was going to take off, and I was really happy. I thought it was really funny. So I decided to debut it in this really big comedy show that I do every year. Now, let's just say the audience wasn't thrilled. I ended up doing so bad that I lost a lot of my credibility from that show, and I ended up even getting dropped by my agent. I couldn't find work, and I just fell into a deep depression, and I didn't want to get back out. Luckily, I got my best friend Ernie. He was there to pick me up. He told me that my whole problem, that I was working top down. I had an idea that I thought was great, and I started making jokes for it. I should have done smaller venue shows first before the big one, and I would have realized that within the first or second or even third show that Justin was offensive and sexist and, just plain not funny. He said, "Dude, try thinking about it from another angle, Ojas. You're going to get into it with all these preconceived notions about what you need to fix and what kind of act would make them not typecast you. You need to do some research and practice a bunch of different acts. I promise you'll find one that suits you." "But what if they don't think I'm funny?" I asked him. "Dude, that's okay. Sometimes you fail, man. But think about it as failing small a bunch of times. So you don't do what you did at the Laugh Factory and fail big. It's part of the process, man. You just gotta keep your head down and keep trying new stuff." So, for a few months, I tried out a new act after new act, and, let me tell you, I failed. I really failed. But after the first few dozen times, it became easier, and then a little easier after the next dozen times. I actually started getting the trick of it, and it took me a few years, but a couple years later, I was doing improv for most of my shows, and just to spice things up on stage. I even remember talking to an audience member after one of my gigs. He was all like, "Dude, that was sick. How'd you do that? I don't get how you comedians can even think up there on stage and do stuff like that. How do you even know what you're saying is the right stuff, dude?" I remember telling him, "Listen, dude, it's not about doing it right or wrong. It's about being good or bad. If the audience thinks I'm good, then it's a good night. If they don't like me, then it's a bad night. However, I will tell you this. I didn't just walk up there and do that without help. So, for years, I've been studying and practicing. It's only through learning those distinct features that I've been able to start using my intuition to come up with material and ad-libbing. By harnessing the entirety of my knowledge, intuition, biases, experiences, and skills, I can go up on stage like I did tonight and ad-lib. It doesn't just happen magically. You got to work at it. So, going back to the story, I kind of went off there a little bit. I kind of bit that kid's head off now that I think about it. But, so, it did get to the point that I was getting back my fan base. I had a new agent. I was making plenty of money. Life was good. However, I did fall into a conundrum. So my new agent had booked me at this big venue. You can see where I'm going with this. I was so excited until she said exactly where it was, and it was the same venue that I had bombed at with my Justin act years before. I was so scared. I wanted so bad to just crush it. But it was scary, and I knew that I had to give it my A game and, create some fresh new jokes. So once again, I asked my best friend Ernie for help. Wisely, he said, dude, you gotta shake things up. You gotta skate, man. Back it up and go crazy. Then when you think of a joke so wild and so crazy, run with it. You'll be surprised at what you find, man. So, given this new revelation, I did what anyone would do in that situation. I dropped some acid. So, I'm living in my living room with my best friend, with Kim, my agent, and with my girlfriend. We're all high on acid, trying to think up new jokes, and we're just running with it. Ernie even suggested we play this get random word game where I say a word and we go around the circle trying to match each theme of the word. So, but every 30 seconds, somebody says a random word, and then we have to start matching on that. So I'll give you an example. So what we did was, somebody said Kim Kardashian. Then the next person said celebrities. Next person said Kanye West. Next person said music. Then hip hop. And my agent said Rajesh Patel, which is my dad's name. We all laughed, and got a kick out of it that she just randomly said my dad's name. But then we stopped to think about it. My dad was always doing goofy stuff that I just wrote off because he was my dad. But ever since I was younger, my friends always came up to me and told me how goofy my dad was and how funny our kind of interaction was. So after a few weeks of testing this and running with it, as Ernie told me to do, I've written a bunch of really funny jokes that were actually relevant and topical to a lot of people's situations with their dads and with their families in second generation immigrant families like myself. Not surprisingly, I went to the comedy show, the big one, and this time I crushed it. The audience couldn't get enough of my material. It was a success and I ended up feeling great, but I was thinking, well, what now? So a few days after the big comedy show, I got a phone call from an executive at Netflix. Netflix, I know. She had been to my show, and she loved it. And she was wondering if I could write some material for some of their new shows that they were about to roll out. I thought, this is exactly the shift that I need, and I 100% was on board. So I did know that I was stepping into new waters with writing shows. So once again, I started my process of rapidly prototyping jokes and testing over and over. And about 3 weeks in, I realized something was missing. I wasn't using everything that I had at my disposal. I was working at Netflix, this huge company with so many different things within their business. So I started thinking about it more like a scientist, kind of. So Netflix is this huge thing. They have original shows, they have movies, they're basically a staple in popular culture. They have Netflix and chill, let's watch it on Netflix, things like that. It's a household name nowadays. So what I need to do is take all those things, all those signs, all their actions that they're doing, and all the goodwill that makes up their brand, and mix and match them. And from that, I'm going to create a show that embodies the culture of Netflix and provide that to an audience. So I started to write, and it was working. I had created a character, and he embodied the idea of the modern Netflix viewer. And I based my content around, popular cultural references and light humor. However, When I approached the Netflix executive with this idea for the show, she told me, well, that's great, but we were really hoping you could write some more stuff about your dad and what it was like growing up as a second-generation immigrant. That's when I realized that the reason why everyone liked me speaking about my dad on stage and talking about the jokes is because it is something that they can relate to. People know that there's issues and complications with life, and that life has struggles and ups and downs. For some, like my dad and like my family growing up, those wicked problems are constant struggles like racism, family communication, relationships, work ethics, things like that. I knew that these types of problems were the ones worth talking about in my show because they were problems for me growing up and many others. So, going to that point, I knew that if I wrote my show this way, it couldn't be a failure. It couldn't just be a half-assed job. It had to be something good that people could watch and empathize with the characters because the stakes were higher. Maybe, just maybe, if I used comedy to break down some of these racial barriers and communication barriers or social barriers, maybe I could use comedy to fix them. It wasn't ever meant to be a quick fix or anything like that for racism or family communication. It was meant to help these wicked problems for that time. I'm going now on the 3rd season of my show, and we just continue making up new things. But now when I do stand-up, I have a new act. I talk about the problems facing our world. I use comedy as a platform for my viewers to see things from a different angle. So, going back to now, where we're at here, I can't be the only one doing this. I can't be the only one fixing these problems. I know that comedy is a really powerful tool to use to create empathy. And I believe everyone should be a comedian in some way because we all need humor in our lives. Then, if you learn the process and develop a level of competency, you can apply those skills in creating stories and jokes that share your own personal message. So, if everyone thought like this, I think we could start solving these wicked problems at a much higher level. So my suggestion here is I'm passing the torch. I'm giving you the reins. Don't just be a great comedian. Don't just be a great person. Be a great storyteller. Be a great researcher. Be a great philanthropist. Be a great public speaker. A human rights activist. Be everything. Be all of these things. Thanks for listening to my story. And just know you can be those things. I'm Ojas, signing out.